Slow week.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the February edition of Wireside Chat. And I'm Paul Whitcover, the Associate Dean of the Online MFA. And as you probably know, I am pleased to have as guests usually instructors from the program, but now this year we're changing it up and we're having successful alumni come and join us and read from their work and talk about their success. And we have one of those tonight, and I could not be prouder to introduce Jessica Cozzi. And let me read a little intro before we get into everything. Jessica L. Cozzi crafts swoon-worthy romances for teens to show that there is always love in the world if you're willing to find it. She is a publicist at William Morrow, an imprint of HarperCollins, and is also a former YA book blogger. She has a BA in creative writing from Fordham University and an MA in young adult fiction writing and professional writing from Southern New Hampshire University. Hey, that's us. Her literary passion lies in young adult stories, including any and all contemporary romantic comedies. Through the stories she puts on bookstore shelves, she gives readers the chance to flip through the pages, fall in love, and find their inner hopeless romantic. So welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, I too am excited. I want to just preface. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, let her read from her book. But her book, her first novel, We've Hit Turbulence. Do you have looks like you're reaching for a copy there. There it is.
And behind me, giant cover. Yep.
Yeah, fantastic book. I finished reading it last week. Could not pull myself away. Just really a gripping, fun book with a lot of surprises in it. With that, I guess, the book is out from Delacorte. And like I said, it's Jessica's first novel, but she's already sold, I believe, 2 other novels to this also to Delacorte.
Yes, so we have 3 books coming with Delacorte.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
And there's the link. That's Jessica in her publicist mode.
I can't turn it off. It's not possible.
All right, so I'm going to shut up and get out of the way and just let you introduce what you want to read for us and then take it away.
Sure. So, hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I was telling Paul before, I remember very vividly being at all of these as a student in this program. So to kind of be the one now to be presenting is really surreal. So I'm very excited. So just to get started, I'm going to read a brief little page or 2 from We've Hit Turbulence, which is my debut YA romance novel. The link is in the chat if you want to learn more. So much of this book was written throughout this program. It was not my thesis novel, but I started working on it after I finished my thesis novel. My agent, Marissa, is from the SNHU program. She was my professor. So it's just really, really exciting to kind of see it all come to life. So a little bit about the book pretty quickly, just before I jump in, so you guys have a little bit of context, is We've Hit Turbulence is a YA romance about a girl who gets on a cross-country flight to go visit her long-distance boyfriend, and things with them are a little bit rocky, and she's trying to work on fixing it, and on the flight, she ends up sitting next to her ex that she never truly got over. So a lot of drama ensues. It's YA, it's fun, it's snappy, it's like a fun, exciting adventure. So I hope you like it. I'm pretty biased that I like it. But yeah, so I'm happy to do a little reading from the first chapter, something pretty quick, just to see if you guys are interested. And so this is actually my first reading, which is what I was telling Paul. So apologies if it's not good. Okay. Chapter 1. Jack Cameron probably isn't cheating on me, but one can never be too sure. At least that's the thought running on a loop in the back of my mind as I shuffle, bleary-eyed, through the airport. How the hell are there humans in this universe who consider themselves morning people? The airport at 4 a.m. is a lawless place, evidenced by the fact that the sun hasn't even peeked over the horizon yet, and I can already see a businessman in a tailored suit barking into his phone at whatever poor soul is on the other end. Nearby, a sleepy-looking woman is perched on a bar stool, sucking down a Bloody Mary like her life depends on it. And a few feet from where she sits, a rumpled-looking girl in a faded Loyola University sweatshirt is spread out on the floor, snoring peacefully, using her carry-on duffel as a pillow. The only unifying factor among the 3 is that they've made it past the dreaded airport security line, which I'm still inching my way through, staring at them enviously from the other side of the metal detectors. With nothing better to do, I check my phone one more time, hoping a text has materialized. While it's obscenely early on the East Coast, it's not even midnight in Honolulu, so there's no reason Jack should be ignoring my message. Or the 50 messages I sent throughout the week. Going for broke, I pull up his contact and hit the call button one more time, crossing my fingers. It rings for an entire minute before the voicemail clicks on. Hi, you've reached Jack Cameron. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Thanks. I hang up, dejected. While my boyfriend and I have never been the attached at the hip type, we still manage to communicate every day, whether through a brief phone call, sporadic text, or sharing funny memes and TikToks. But for the past 7 days, I've barely heard from him at all. No likes on my silly stories or responses to my Snapchats, just a half-hearted text here and there. What started as a slow trickle of worry in my chest has already morphed into an all-encompassing panic. I stare at our last messages from a week ago on my tiny screen until my eyes water. From the lack of blinking or the hurt, I'm not entirely sure. Jack, got a lot of studying ahead of me tonight. Good night, Olive. Olive. Night, Jack. See you soon for spring break. Well, maybe it's a touch impulsive, but that's the reason I'm hopping on a flight a whole week earlier than I originally planned. Because Jack isn't answering me, and something feels weird, and it's the spring of my senior year at Becker High, so it's not like I'm really missing anything. Which is exactly why it was easy to convince Mom, the diehard hopeless romantic, to let me move up the trip and head to the University of Hawaii a week early, using the excuse that Jack will have a bunch of exams next week and we won't be able to spend much time together. Maybe I forgot to mention to her that Jack has no idea I'm coming, but that's not something I can worry about right now. That's all I got.
That's a great setup.
Thank you.
One of the things that I really like and admire about what you do in the opening of your book is how you set the scene and provide what readers need to know about the backstory, and also answer some questions that readers might have that goes toward like the verisimilitude of what you're writing. Like, why is this high school girl, how is she able to get on this plane early? But you answer all those questions, and the voice of your narrator is so trustworthy that I think readers come along for the ride. So can you talk a little bit about like the importance of the voice of your character?
Yes, so something I will definitely say is that that is not something that most writers get right on the first try. I definitely did not either. Marissa can probably speak to this too. We've Hit Turbulence has gone through 10, if not more, complete total rewrites from the very first seed to what it is now. So
Wow.
it takes a lot of practice. Finding that balance of the first early drafts of the book, I kind of just info dumped and like kind of just like was saying like, oh, I got to go to Hawaii because my mom's letting me go early and blah blah blah. And it felt more of just kind of lecturing at the reader than really letting them learn it. So it took a lot of practice. I had to, through various rewrites, jot down like what is the info I need people to know pretty early on, and how can I get it to them without like this giant block of text that's like, here's everything that's going on. So I found it like having Olive sitting on the security line and worrying, and as the chapter continues, you kind of get a little bit more context even further about where she's going, what she's doing. I made it more of like her just idly daydreaming as she's moving through the security line, broken up with what's happening at security and stuff to kind of keep the reader interested. And that was kind of my goal. So the reader was able to, after chapter one, you feel like you have the info you need to understand and not be like, why the heck is she going here? But it doesn't feel like it was just kind of like thrown at you in a giant lecture. So it does take a balance. I had to rewrite it over and over again until it felt like the right time. Sometimes I put too much, sometimes I put too little, but I found it very helpful. Like I had a sticky note on my computer that was like bullet points of what do people need to know in this chapter before they can continue. And I kind of played with different ways that I can weave that in until I found one that felt right.
I think you did a great job on it.
Thank you.
And people think of romances as a kind of, straight ahead sort of story. Like, there's not going to be like some kind of convoluted plot. There's not going to be tricks and twists exactly. But I found your novel to be an exception to that, and maybe the exception that proves the rule, because I think romance a lot of times doesn't get the respect that it deserves. But one of the things I want to talk about in your book is the beginning of your novel. Once she gets on the plane, a big chunk of your novel takes place on the plane. And
An entire third, yes.
yeah, and I was like, I was so impressed. I mean, it's a really an audacious narrative move. You've got your character sitting in a seat on the plane, and as you mentioned, her ex comes and sits next to her at the very last minute, just pure coincidence.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, there's some lady sitting next to her that she doesn't even know, who's got her
Yeah.
nose buried in a book or a magazine. So you're faced with the challenge of like keeping readers invested in the story when your characters are stuck on a plane. I mean, it's not like there can be a lot of action, right?
Yeah.
So talk about what made you decide to do that and how you met that challenge.
So I don't know how many people here are familiar with a lot of reading a lot of romance, but I'm a very big romance reader and I always have been. And romance tropes are what breathe life into these books. And one of the tropes that is done time and time again in romance, never gets old to me, is forced proximity, where the characters are forced together in some way. The one of the jokes like kind of related to that is like there's only one bed. How many movies and books have you seen where they need to check
Right.
in at the inn because their car broke down and there's only the honeymoon suite left? Like that is a trope that's the gift that keeps on giving. It's so fun and people really enjoy reading that. So I wanted to write something like that. But you can't get any more forced proximity than sitting in an economy seat on a cross-country flight. There's nowhere to go. Like you literally can't outrun this. And so I felt like that was a very intentional narrative choice because Olive, as you read the book, you learn that she's somebody that her life, when she gets really hard, she kind of just shuts down and tries to shut things out and push forward. And you can't ignore your ex when he's sitting literally pressed up shoulder to you for 13 hours. Like you can't outrun him. And you're forced to kind of reckon with the things that you tried so hard to ignore. So that is why I made that choice. And then actually executing it was a whole nother thing. That was another big part of the book that got like several different rewrites. When I first wrote it, it was all in present tense, and I kind of did some info dumping. And then I realized I didn't really like that because you needed to know why they broke up and what the messiness was. So at first it was all info dumping. I didn't really love that. So then I decided to rewrite it in the second draft, and it was like alternating between the present tense and flashback scenes. And it was a lot more strict, like this chapter's present, this chapter's past. And it started to feel like that was kind of detracting away from the fact that you were on the plane. So we eventually, like after several other rewrites, decided to do it where I was very intentional about weaving aspects of their past into their conversation and things that Olive's thinking about. She looks at Tyler's hands and she has a memory about when he cross-stitched her Valentine's gift. Instead of putting a whole chapter about that, it was an interesting segue to take something she's seeing in the present and make her think about the past. So it was another delicate dance, and that one actually I moved it into dual timeline, and then we went out on submission with this book, and we had a revise and resubmit from an editor at Delacorte, who is not my editor, but there was another editor, and she said, "This would be really great. Can you try condensing it into a single timeline?" So I did a lot of work to rewrite and get everything kind of back into a single timeline and away from the flashbacks. And then my editor that bought the book, when I got my edit letter, she was like, "This is great. Can we make it dual timeline?" So the book went back and forth several different times until we found something that I feel like was a really good balance where it's not even within a chapter itself, they weave in and out of the present and the past, but it feels very natural and comfortable and it keeps the reader engaged, which is very hard because, like you said, you're on a plane. That can get very boring. All they can do is sit and stare at each other and eat chips and drink ginger ale for 13 hours. So it kind of like forced them that they really have to reckon there's nothing else to do except talk about your past and everything you've been trying to hide because there's nowhere to go. So I think that that was a very intentional choice to kind of force them together and force them to talk in a way that she couldn't run.
Yeah. And you really get the sense, I mean, right from the start. I mean, obviously you kind of know what you're getting into. It's a romance novel, but you really can feel the unresolved connection between these characters. Like something has happened in their past to split them up, but whatever that was, I don't want to give anything away, but whatever that was has not been resolved.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of feelings there, and there's still a desire. You can see that these are characters that desire to connect, even if rationally they're kind of telling each other, well, it's too late for that. We burned our bridges or whatever.
Yeah, I think definitely, especially because teenage love is so messy by design. That's just like what it is. I think a hill I will die on is that teenage love is just as valid and as important as love when you get older. I'm also biased because my parents were high school sweethearts, so like I've seen high school love persevere. My partner, we've been together. We met each other in middle school. We haven't been together that long, but we've met each other since
Wow.
then. So I think definitely for me, I don't think that teenage feelings and teenage romance is something that should be like brushed aside. Like I think it's very important because teenagers in general, you're experiencing the world for the first time. Like that's why when people ask why I write YA romance specifically, I think there's a special kind of magic to it because, you know, everything a teenager's experiencing, like even as adults, you experience love and heartbreak and loss and friendship breakups. But going through it for the first time when you have no other experience is a whole different animal in and of itself. A story I love to tell is that I failed my road test the first time I took it in high school. And I came home and I locked myself in my room and didn't speak to my family for days. And I was embarrassed and I was convinced my life was over. And now looking back at it, like I'm 28 years old, and now looking back, I'm like, girl, you were being ridiculous because you passed again a week later. Like you were fine. But in the moment, like that example is like in the moment, it felt like my world was literally crumbling at the edges and there was nothing I can do. And so much of that, like your first teenage breakup feels like the world is ending. And I think that's what made it really fun to explore Tyler and Olive is that teenage love is messy and like they broke up and instead of handling it like young adults, they ignored each other because they didn't know what else to do and they had no experience. And that's why forcing them together on the plane was fun because it's like, well, now you can't run. Now you have to
Right.
be an adult and talk about this.
Right. I mean, one of the hallmarks, as everyone who's taken MFA 514 or taken the genre romance courses knows, one of the hallmarks of the romance is the happy ever after or the happy for now sort of ending. When you're writing a YA romance, it seems like that becomes a little trickier, right? Because
Yes.
you've got somebody who's like 17, 18 years old. So talk about that, how you finesse that.
I think it very much like I tapped into how I remember feeling at that age. I did not have an Olive and Tyler situation, by the way, to be clear. But I tapped into how I felt that age. I remember being a senior. I'm the oldest of all my parents' children, so I was the first one to go to college out of my family. And I remember like the anxiety of I was still so young, but I was expected to make such an adult decision like what school you're going to go to, taking out loans, like I'm setting myself up for debt, like things that I didn't. It was a weird balance being a senior in high school because you're still a kid. You're still very much a kid. There's still very much about the world you don't know. But also you're being like pushed out of the nest and like it's time to be a grown up. And that was something that Olive really struggled with. And that's what I really leaned into when I was writing is that she is still so young and like her and Tyler have very different philosophies on life. His philosophy is we're only 18. We have so much of our life to live, so many things to explore and try again and fail and go over again. And Olive sees it the other way as we're already 18. Like we need to start preparing for life and preparing for like going to college and having a family and having a house. And that's very much because of her home life, which you see throughout the book is not super stable. So she kind of is clinging to stability that she didn't really have. And I would just found it really interesting to explore like the two different teenage philosophies of we're only 18 or we're already 18. Like
Yeah.
you're either behind on life or you feel like you have a million years ahead.
Yeah. I remember that very well. I was kind of like in the oh my gosh, I got to straighten up and get my act together here.
Exactly. Yep.
And
And
then
then some people are like, we're only 18,
right, right. Well, I look back at it now and I'm like, dude, you were 18. Come on.
hmm It's a
Um,
rough time. It's a rough time to be a teenager for sure.
the one of the interesting things about and kind of profound things about this book is the relationship between her and her mom,
hmm
because her mom is this person who's kind of always searching for romance, and maybe even in the wrong places. She kind of puts all of her eggs into one basket a little bit too soon.
hmm
And that causes a reaction. I mean, at least that's how I read it. That causes a reaction from some of the men that she's interested in. They pull away, and she has her heart broken again and again and again. And Olive is determined to avoid that fate. And yet, by trying so hard to avoid it, she's basically doing something very similar.
Yep.
And I thought that kind of like the way in which the two of them they're very different. They're trying, Olive is determined to avoid her mom's mistakes, but she is kind of in a weird way following her mom's footsteps. And that's one of the things that she sort of has to recognize about
Yep.
herself.
Definitely. I think I made her relationship with her mother difficult on purpose. It's not difficult in the sense like she is not an abusive mother. You can tell that she loves her daughter, that she
Yep.
actually loves her so much that she's her best friend, but there's also sometimes a downside to your parent being your best friend is when your 18th boyfriend breaks up with you when you thought he was about to propose, it's your 16-year-old daughter who's carrying you to the couch and giving you ice cream and nursing your heart back to health. And I think it kind of showed that sometimes love can be not not bad for you, but sometimes love can take too much. Or that's what Olive sees of it. Is she sees this is not worth the risk of, like, Olive knows and she acknowledges there are plenty of people, Tyler's parents, Tyler's brother, there are plenty of people who fall in love and have a great relationship and a great life. But she also lives firsthand with the example of what happens in the other end, where love can hurt you, where
Yeah.
wanting it would be better if her mom just decided she wanted to be alone and then wouldn't be hurt. But seeing how badly her mom wants love and can't have it makes Olive feel like this can't even be a factor in my future. I need to focus on the concrete things I can fix, and if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, which Tyler does not accept, because he's a very different personality, and that's something that they kind of butt heads with about over and over in the past and even in the present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me switch gears just a little bit, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about, like, well, how did all this come to be? How did you get from, being a student in the MFA to having your first book come out?
Yeah, so that was a very interesting road. So I graduated undergrad in 2020. So we know how that went for everybody involved. So I graduated undergrad at an in-person school in 2020, and then we were stuck home. And I had always wanted my MFA, and I didn't know if I would be able at the time before COVID hit. At the time, I didn't know if I would be able to balance an MFA with working full time because I always wanted to work in publishing. I wanted to be a publicist since I was like 12 years old. My mom's like, "How do you even know what that word means?"
Yes.
I was a book blogger with one of my good friends, and we used to like write book reviews online. And when it started gaining traction and publicists started pitching us, that's when I learned like there's a whole other avenue for the book world, is I can be somebody whose job is to pitch books all day. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I didn't know how I'd balance that with going to grad school. So I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll do it down the line. COVID hit, we had all the time in the world. There was a hiring freeze, and I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. I like have a story burning inside me and I need to get it out. So I did the MFA program. Incredible. I truly, like, I'm not even just saying this because I'm talking to people in the program. I talk this program up to anybody that will listen. People that have no interest in writing and will never get an MFA know the intimate details of this program, because I talk about it all the time, how much I loved it. It was so formative to me as a writer. The outlining process that I learned in one of the classes is still what I use today. My newsletter, my website, all of that was built. My socials were all built in the classes through this program. So it is very, very foundational, I will say, for people that plan to be published authors. Like, do not take those courses lightly. Really, really put your heart and soul into them, because that was a great foundation for me to start when I became published. And then so I did the program. And then when the seniors graduated, we were able to do like a round robin with the agent pitching that I believe you were the one who set it up, Paul, right? Was it
Yeah.
you? Yeah. So we got to
With
do it.
with Marissa's help,
Yes,
I
with
hasten
Marissa.
to add.
Yes. So it was like it was a round robin. Do you guys still do it? Like, people know what
Oh
it
yeah,
is?
we do
Yeah.
twice a year. Yep.
Awesome. So that was like the first one that I'd ever been in. I went into it expecting I probably was not going to get a book deal, but I was going to get good practice in pitching my book and boiling it down to an elevator pitch, which is something I was not very good at. I yap a lot, in case you can't tell. So I thought it would just be good practice and that would be it. And then I met Marissa on a call, and one of the first things I said was that my goal as a writer is to be Gen Z's Sarah Dessen. And she was like, "That's crazy," because I was just telling somebody I want to sign the new Sarah Dessen. So we clicked right away. I know Marissa's been in the chat, so I don't know if she wants to chime in about that at all. But it was just, we clicked right away. She read the piece, like, we did so well together, and the rest was history. I mean, it's been so exciting, and it's just been really fun to, because I work in publishing, which I'm sure people will ask about that. We can touch on that
Yep.
too, but it's cool to be on both sides. But that round robin thing, like, I was just expecting to get practice, and I ended up getting the key to the rest of my career, which was crazy. I'm
Yeah.
very grateful.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. And what can I say? Marissa has a good eye.
Yes, thank you. I think so.
So one thing that you mentioned earlier, and actually before I ask you this question, I want to just invite people to to post questions in the chat for Jessica, and I'll bring them to her attention, or maybe she'll read them herself. Anyway, you had mentioned, like, so you initially received feedback from an editor at Delacorte who said, like, we want these changes in the book, and you made those changes. And then you had another editor at Delacorte who said, like, well, basically unmake those changes.
Mhm.
So why were there two separate editors at Delacorte
So it actually was
involved
a
with the book?
really great story. The editor the first editor, the one who said, you know, maybe we should make it into one timeline,
Hmm.
she was the one who acquired the book, and then she got promoted to publisher of Delacorte. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
she no longer was editing, like doing hands-on editing. So they transition you to another in-house editor, and that can usually go one of two ways. It can go really great, which in my case it did. My editor, Allie, is a gem, and we click really well and we work really, really well together. And sometimes I forget she's not the one that acquired my We've Hit Turbulence because
Hmm.
her love for it feels so much the same as that previous editors did. But sometimes you run the risk of it going the other way where it gets assigned an editor who's not super into the project, but they're seeing it through because it got put on their desk. But I very much that did not happen to me, to be very clear. I love Allie. We are great. I did two more books with her. I would do every book with her again till the end of time. But yeah, so that's what ended up happening is the editor who acquired it became the president of Delacorte.
And I mean, that's got to be
Great.
good too, right?
Yeah, great
She's
for her. Yeah.
well, and great for you because I'm
Yeah.
sure she feels takes a personal interest in your
Yes.
career.
Exactly. So that's why she got promoted, and then acting heads of imprints usually do not like have
Hmm.
hands-on editing. So that's
Yep.
why. But I got very lucky because now I get to work with Allie, and she's a gem. I love her a lot.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that happens quite a bit in publishing. I mean, it's a fluid career, and people are moving up, people are moving on, people are kind of switching roles.
All the
So
time. All the
yeah,
time.
so you definitely as a your book is acquired by one editor, and they're really that's happened to me too, actually. And
Hmm.
there's no guarantee that you're going to be with that editor for the next book or even for the book that was
Exactly.
acquired. So I guess you just kind of a heads up to people that that's something to be prepared for.
Yeah. And it
Um,
doesn't always have to be bad. Like I said,
no, it doesn't.
it can turn out really great.
Yep, exactly. And it can go the other way too. Like for example, the editor that bought my first book is now my agent.
Really?
Because he got out of the editing business and went into the agenting business. So
That's
like I
awesome.
just said, it's a very fluid industry, and people are coming in, going
Everybody
out
knows
all the time.
everybody
That's
all
very
the time.
true. It's a small
Always.
it's a small world for sure.
Very, very.
Um, all right, so let me pull a couple questions out of the chat
Sure.
here. Um, here's somebody. Here's a good question. Since I'm outline focused right now, how do you approach outlining or story structure?
My friend Chloe is in this chat right now, and Chloe will know what I'm talking about because I am a meticulous outliner. It is a running joke with my friends. I actually started in this program. We did something where it was like we learned the beat sheet for Save the Cat, and so I started with that, and I like write, I do like a paper outline, and I write like the beats off the Save the Cat, and like kind of fill in there, and then I write every one of those beats on an index card, and I lay them out on the floor and space them out. And then I write an index card for every single other scene in the book. Every single one. It ends up being like 200 cards. It becomes a mess. I do bully Chloe into outlining. Um, I outline very, very meticulously. It usually takes me about a month to even finish the outline before I'll even touch a draft. And for me, I feel better that way because I lay them all out on the floor until they're in the order I want. I color code them based on A plot or B plot so I can see like, oh, this section's like really A plot heavy. We gotta get some scenes that like progress B plot in there. And so I'm very
So
visual that way.
when you
Oh, sorry.
say when you say you color code it, do you mean like you write with different ink, or you
No, the
use
cards are
different
different
the
colors.
cards are different colors? Wow,
Yes.
that's so smart. Do you
For
put them
one of
up on the wall or anything like that, or
So I don't have I could take the stuff down behind me, but I don't have a lot of wall space. So what I do is there's actually a picture on my Instagram. I have to resurface it for you guys. I lay them all out on the floor. I spend one night where I lay them all out on the floor, move them in the orders that I need them to be, and then once
Mhm.
I feel like it is set and like as good as it's gonna get, I just like stack them in a single stack. I actually think I do have for my book too. I have them right here. I stack them in order. So this is the order of
Wow.
which the book progresses, and like I check it off as I do it. So that way, like I can take this with me. I write at a coffee shop every Sunday. I just bring this with me, and like as I finish a scene, I move it to the end, and like that's kind of how I do it. But I don't get to this part until it's been on the floor and been like perfectly in the order I want it in.
Mhm.
And you can kind of see here, I did like this one was my second book, which I can talk about later, but this one is like very, very romance movie heavy. So I did all pink cards, but they're different shades of pink. So like the
Right. Look
dark
at
pink
that.
might be like the character, her issues with
Per
her love interest or
Perfect
her
for
friend.
Valentine's Day.
Exactly. So for me, I'm very, very much like a tactile. I need to move it. I need to see it. I need color coding really helps me think. So it gets a little bit crazy. It ends up being like 200 cards laid out on the floor, but then once
Yeah.
I get them in this stack, this can kind of just come with me anywhere. I write on the subway when I go to work, because I work in Manhattan. So I'm able to kind of just bring it with me. But that is like I do the Save the Cat and then I expand on it and get every scene written on an index card.
So because you're so meticulous, is there room in your process for inspiration to strike?
Oh yeah, I think in this draft, in the index card version draft of We've Hit Turbulence, Delia, who is Olive and Tyler's best friend, I believe she's in 2 scenes max. If that, she was like a throwaway, like put her in for a scene or two and whatever. And as I'm writing, she was just so snarky and funny that I was kind of sad when the scenes that Delia was in were over. And I definitely like give myself room to breathe. That like it's I Delia started being really funny and really like snappy, and I wanted to see her more. So I just started adding her into more scenes later on. I'd be like, you know what, this is a scene Delia can barge in on and be a part of. And she became a major part of the book. She became one of the major key characters that I did not outline her that way, but I just had so much fun writing her. And for me, a lot of people don't like a really meticulous outline because they feel restricted. But for me, I feel the opposite. I feel calm in knowing that I can veer off because
Hmm.
I can see the next goalpost. So if I want to explore a scene, like there's a scene in the book where Olive and Delia have a sleepover. And I won't spoil anything that goes on there, but that sleepover was not a scene that I outlined, but I was like, you know what? I can write it because I see the next index card. I know what I have to get to later. So as long as I can
Hmm.
veer from here to there, it's fine. So I like seeing the road ahead. Some writers do not. Um, but I feel freer to draft whatever I want because I can see the goalpost and I know that even if I meander, I know my way back.
So you just mentioned Olive. So is Olive the same Olive? Is Olive the protagonist of the second book too?
Oh no, sorry, that was for Weave Turbulence. The
Oh,
second book is called The Rom-Com Conundrum. It is not oh, that one is announced. The third one is not announced yet, so I can't talk about it. But
okay.
the Rom-Com Conundrum, it's a not a standalone. I mean, it is a standalone, sorry, it's not a sequel. And it's about a girl named Sasha who, for a school project, decides to write her own romance screenplay. And she's never been in love, which is a bit of a problem. So she decided she's going to rewatch all of the old 2000s and 90s rom-coms for research. And so she decides to do it the old school way and rent them from the library because she's hell-bent on committing to the cause. And she ends up falling in love with the page who works at the library, and she learns that real love is a lot messier than the movies. So
Uh-huh.
that's what this one is right here. Which is a lot of fun. But that one comes out in fall 2027. But for We've Hit Turbulence, Delia was someone who was
Celia,
not, yeah,
right.
Delia kind of just burst her way
She
onto the scene and didn't want to leave.
she yes, she's a very cool character. I like her. I like her quite a bit. Maybe I'll write about her someday. Maybe she'll get her own book.
I've been considering it. People have brought that up to me, and I was sad when her scenes were over. So I was like,
Hmm.
maybe that's not a terrible plan.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Let me see if I can pull another couple questions here. How long did it take you to get your first draft ready to be looked at by someone else?
So back when National Novel Writing Month was still around, I wrote We've Hit Turbulence in 25 days. Would not
Ah.
recommend. Would not recommend. My sanity did not make it through that in one piece. It was a lot of work. It was horrible. It was so messy. I actually found the first draft of it recently, and I literally was like, and I gagged. I was like, I can't look at this. It's not good. So I wrote that in 25 days, and then I cleaned it up in about 3 months, and then that's when I gave it to Marissa. But before I start writing, I always give her my outline first, just so I'm like, here's the outline on the paper. Not, I don't give her the index cards. Those are mine. Um, but I give her like a general outline so she can be like, this is good, or maybe we need to veer in a little bit of a different direction. So I get like kind of a temperature check first. But it took me for We've Had Turbulence, the first draft was finished in about 25 days, but it was about 3 to 4 months before I showed it to anybody else. It needed a lot of work and a lot of cleaning. But that's also because it was such a condensed timeline.
All right, here's a kind of a somewhat related question, I suppose. I recently did an agent pitch with several agents through our SNHU event. I had one agent tell me the story idea was great, but it needed to be professionally edited. Um, do you have any advice for that sort of thing? Like,
I think if
getting
people,
professionally edited.
yeah, I think if that's what people want, I definitely don't think there's anything against it. I have never gotten any of my books professionally edited, other than my editor at Penguin.
Hmm.
But like I've never like my thesis novel, We've Hit Turbulence, these books, like I wrote them the first draft myself, very messy, printed it out on a hard copy, and then left it alone for 2 months, and then went back to it 2 months later and did a big editorial overhaul with fresh eyes. But I have never freelanced for an editor or for beta readers. I give them to a few friends that I work with very closely to take a read, but it's more so just to see if they like the vibes of it versus needing like strict critique. So I
Hmm.
think that if that's something that you think your book can need, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think if people are telling you that is what's required, I definitely don't agree with that. I've never had my books professionally edited by somebody other than the in-house publisher. I had my agents look at it, but again, like if you don't have an agent yet, I can see the merit in kind of
Hmm.
getting another eye to look at. So I don't think it hurts, but it's not something I would say is a die-hard requirement because I haven't done that.
Would you say that the advice that you got from Marissa, as you were developing the novel for submission, was that a kind of editorial
Yeah,
input?
yeah, I think definitely what really helps me is that I give Marissa and her co-agent Elisa, who I work with together, I give them, like I said, I give them the outline before I start, more as a heads up versus like not a permission, more of just I'm gonna
Hmm.
do this. And I think that saves me a lot of like having to walk things back later because they'll tell me we really like this, like right off the bat, or we really like this, but make sure to add this element, or maybe you should up the stakes before you start. So running it past them, kind of getting a temperature check is helpful because they might point out something like in the rom-com conundrum, I think Elisa pointed out. So like this outline looks really great, but maybe like she's like, we should heighten the stakes just a tiny bit. And so I added a whole nother subplot in that like if I had done that after the book was already written, it would have been so much more work than me doing it early on. So I think like if you do have an outline, like their editorial notes are more like fixing timing that didn't make sense or fix like a thing about character development where like you can go deeper here. But there were not really big, huge editorial notes because I made an effort to give them the outline beforehand, so our bases were covered.
Hmm. There was a follow-up from the person that just asked that question. Let
Mhm.
me clarify, the agent would not read the book without it being professionally edited in advance. Is that standard? That is not standard.
No.
Um, I would be a little suspicious of something like that, to be honest with you.
I
Um,
Yeah, I think like you said, if that's something you were willing to already do, I don't think that could be harmful. But if you're only doing it for one agent, there are a million agents out there that would not require that of you.
yep.
Marissa did not require that of me. None of my friends' agents required that of them. It needs to be clean, of course, which we know in our program already. Like you can't just vomit out draft zero and give it to an agent. Nobody can do that. It does need to be clean, but that can be cleaned by you. It can be cleaned by beta readers. It can be cleaned by mine was cleaned by the MFA program. Like my thesis classes were where I was getting editorial notes. So I don't think you need, if someone's telling you you need to do that, I would be a little bit weary of that.
Yeah, and I mean, every agent has their own methods and their own preferences in something. I mean, I don't mean to suggest that it's it means that there's something wrong with this agent, but I don't see a need for it
Yeah,
personally.
I
I
agree.
if I were agenting, that wouldn't be something that I would have in place. And I don't know any agents other than this one agent, and I wasn't aware of that about her. Um,
Yeah, and like I said, like it's not if it's something you already planned on doing that you thought could be helpful, like great, but it would not be something I would spend the money on just for this one agent if you weren't on the fence about it already.
yeah. So let's once again we'll pivot. That's a
Mhm.
word I hear being used a lot these days. So let's pivot over to your day job as a publicist, which is something that you always wanted
Yes.
to do, and now
Yeah.
you've achieved your dream job. Um, what do you do? Tell us what your day is like.
So I am a book publicist at HarperCollins Publishers, and the best way I like to describe it to people is when you open the New York Times or People Magazine and go to their book section, or you turn on the Today Show and they're talking about the 10 best books for summer or whatever. That's the work of a publicist. My job is to pitch books that we're working on at HarperCollins to print, TV, podcast, radio, every type of media, social media, influencers, pitch them the books and say, here's why you should cover it. Here's why this book is important. Um, I find it so fun. I love it. Like I said, I started very early on as a book blogger as a teenager in high school, just for fun. And so much of that was like talking about the books I loved and convincing people to read them. And now basically I get paid to do that. Like that's what I
Yeah.
do is if Paul's the editor at People Magazine, I'll be like, Paul, this is the book of the summer. You need to write an article about it. It needs to be in your roundup. You're gonna make a mistake if you don't do that. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of emails. My typical day, my favorite thing about working in publicity is that you do not have the same day twice. That's what we like to say in our job. Some days I go to the office and it's mainly doing emails and sending pitches and mailing books. Some days, like last week, I was putting together a mailing for a book that is centered around like an art museum. So in the mailing, we sent little sketchbooks and mini pencils along with the book. So it's packing those up, it's ordering the products for that, brainstorming the products for that. My favorite days are when I get to accompany my authors to media appearances. So when my authors are on GMA or the Today Show, Pix 11, like I get to go with them and be behind stage and kind of hang out with them. Um, if anybody has Instagram, my Instagram is Jess Cozzi Writes. I see Marissa just noticed that. I'm constantly posting videos on Instagram of a day in the life as a book publicist, which I find interesting because I like what I do, but I feel like you said a lot of people might not know all the cool things that you get to do as a publicist. We travel with our authors, we bring them. I escorted an author to Comic-Con. I got paid to go to Comic-Con for 3 days. And after I
Yeah.
escorted her to her panel, I had the whole rest of the day to just kind of do whatever. So it's really fun. There's always something different to do. I'm continuously posting videos and behind the scenes of what it's like to be a publicist because I feel like it is so expansive and it just it keeps you from being bored for sure.
Mhm. So what about when it comes time to like hand the reins over to somebody
Mhm.
else to publicize your first novel? I mean, and
Yeah,
because you don't want to be, I'm assuming
you don't want to be
Delacorte doesn't
micromanager.
want you to be out there like, at cross purposes potentially with their plans.
Hmm. I think definitely I got very lucky in the sense that from the minute we submitted to Delacorte, we were very clear about my role in publishing. Just because I feel that that can be an asset. I saw that somebody asked
Totally.
to if they feel like if it helps or hinders me. I think it is incredibly helpful to be a publicist and to because I know how to market myself. I know how to market my book because I do it for hundreds and hundreds of authors. I work for William Morrow. We publish over 600 books a year in my imprint alone of HarperCollins. Like I work with a lot of people, a lot of books across different genres. So I find it really helpful. And we were very clear with Delacorte from the beginning that I had that experience. And then so when I met my editor and met my publicist and my marketer, I was very clear with them and I said, hey, I have this experience. I said, here's a list of people I work with regularly at HarperCollins that I think it might be nice for them to hear a pitch from me because I work with them all the time versus hearing it from you who they don't know. But I was very open with them and I said, I have the experience. I'm happy to help, but I'm also happy to step back because
Mhm.
sometimes you micromanage it a little bit can be shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. And I did not want to do that. I didn't, like you said, I didn't want to cross wires and like snipe a hit from somebody else. I just didn't want to do that. But my team was very, very gracious and like I gave them a list of the people that I knew and they said, you reach out to them, we'll handle everybody else. I did a lot of like my own publicity on like by design. Like I told them like I enjoy doing this. And I think like I organized my whole launch event and they're like, "Are you sure you don't need our help?" And I'm like, "No, I got it. Like I'm got it. I'm good." Um, so I wanted to do that because like I said, I love my job. I love my job a stupid amount. We joke at work. I've been there 5 years and my boss still jokes that I like skip when I come into the office because I'm so
Yeah.
happy. Which I'm very lucky because that's not very common to love your job that much. So I didn't even want to give it up. So I would have been my publicist the whole way through. But I do have a publicist at Delacorte. She's very lovely, and we very much like operate as a team instead of her working for me, which
Hmm.
I think helps us both because I'm able to lighten her load a little bit, and because she knows I have the experience, she's okay with letting me like. She let me book my launch event, and she wasn't worried about it because I do it. I was Cher's publicist, you guys. I booked events for Cher, so I can book my
Hmm.
launch event, and like they were like, you know how to do this, like you're fine, you're good. Um, so very much, I think like they were very, very collaborative with me, which I really did appreciate.
So here's a question from the chat. Any advice on how to get into the publishing world? It seems like a catch-22 where if you don't have the experience, you can't find a job, but you can't find a job without the experience. So how did you get your job?
So I had interned at a few different publishers when I was in college. But for me, when I graduated undergrad and everyone was in hiring freeze, I wanted to be in publishing so bad, but it was very much that case of the only people that were getting hired were the people that like knew somebody or used to work for somebody or whatever. So my advice to people is there are more ways in than you think. After applying to a million publicist and editorial marketing jobs, I didn't get them. Everyone was in a hiring freeze. So I pivoted a little bit and I applied to the Brooklyn Book Festival as an administrative assistant. And so I did get that job and I worked for that during the pandemic. And that was very helpful to me because even though it wasn't being a publicist, even though it wasn't working in publishing, when an author gets invited to the Brooklyn Book Festival, who is the person that the publisher they put you in touch with? The author's publicist. That publicist organized festival appearances. So I was the admin assistant. I was very much in contact all the time with all these big authors, publicists at all these big major houses. And so I started to make friends that way. And after I finished that role and after the festival ended and I wanted to work in publishing, I sent an email to some of those publicists that I really connected with and like we were on a pretty friendly basis because they had several authors attending and things like that. And all I said was like, I know people can't hand me a job, but I said, hey, I'm starting to look. Here's my resume. I feel like I'm really good at this, this, and this. If you happen to hear of anything, let me know. And actually, one of the publicists who was my former boss at an internship, even though I connected with her because of the festival, not even because of that, she was the one who recommended me for the open role at William Morrow. And I not only said I wanted to be a publicist when I grew up, but when I was younger, I specifically said I wanted to be a publicist at HarperCollins.
Really?
My mom was like, "What the? How do you know any of this?" Like she was like, how do you even know what any of this is?" But I very specifically had been saying since I was like 10 years old that I was going to be a publicist at HarperCollins, and I got very, very lucky in that sense. And I see that Paul has said here, like being an intern can help with the experience and the connections. Like I said, I didn't email people asking for jobs. I just emailed saying if you have any leads, because these job portals can be tricky to navigate, or they show up on LinkedIn where 8 million people apply and it can be difficult. So I found another way in by joining the festival, which is a book adjacent thing. Other examples would be libraries, book selling, working at the events sector of certain indie bookstores in town or Barnes and Nobles. You'll get to know publicists that way.
Volunteering at conventions and
Exactly.
conferences.
That's where we all are. I mean, publicists bring their authors to book events. They bring them to bookstores. They bring them to festivals. They bring them to Comic-Con. The person trailing behind the author is almost always their publicist. So go to places that those authors would be, and you can just start to network that way.
Yeah, and I mean this kind of underscores something that we teach like right from the start in the program in 505 is like the importance of networking. And sometimes students feel like, oh, I don't want to network. I don't want to be like, involved in some shady business of using and manipulating people. But that's not really what it's all about. It's about, like you did with the book festival, right? You put yourself out there, you were giving something back. You were basically serving the community. And as a result of that, you made connections and you didn't, use those connections in any kind of nefarious way. You merely made friends.
And I think with my job, it was very helpful because they worked with me. They knew I had good attention to detail. They knew I was good at scheduling things. They knew I was good at responding to people and talking to people. They through that job, even though I wasn't a publicist, I was just an admin assistant, they were able to get a taste of how I am as an employee, as I am as somebody who helps organize things. And I think that really showed them like I'm not just like this random name, I'm somebody that's worth giving a chance to. And I got very, very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, I'm sure they love you at William Morrow. So
I love my job. I love my team. I told my boss the only reason I will leave is if I get fired or I die or I retire. Those are the only three things, the only three ways I would leave. I absolutely love my job.
Well, what if you become a multi-million selling author? Would you keep your job?
100%. People ask me that all the time. I don't think I'd ever give up this job. I love it. I love both too much.
Yeah.
I do not think I would ever give it up. I think even if by the grace of the heavens I became a billion-dollar author one day, I would do this job for fun because I find so much enjoyment in it.
That would be like, let me introduce you to my publicist, Stephen King.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it.
So here's another question from the chat. Going back to your index card method, can you give us, and maybe you can't do this, but it's an interesting question. Can you give us an example of the index card content?
Yes, I can. So, all right, you're going to pretend you don't hear these names because I can't talk about them for another year. So just everybody forget about this. So basically, I have scenes here. So in this book I'm working on right now, the main character's name is Thea, and her antagonist is Petra, and the love interest is Wyatt. So I have a scene where they are at a bonfire together. And so I have a scene where a card where it says they arrive at the bonfire. I have a scene where it says Petra immediately sees that Thea and Wyatt are close together at the bonfire and she gets jealous. And then I have a
So that's
card.
that's one card.
That was two. One was the bonfire.
Yep.
One is that she
So
sees them and gets
so
jealous.
they're kind of like, is it like a one card equals one beat?
Yes, basically that's how it is.
Okay.
I do the save the cat with the general beats and then I lay them out and then I write individual cards of individual scenes and beats that will get from this one to that one. You know, like
Yep.
Save the Cat has like, Dark Night of the Soul and then they do something about it. Okay, what's the scene in between that
Hmm.
makes them decide they're going to do something about it? So that's kind of what I do. So I
Yep.
have a scene that they arrive, a scene that they see each other and she gets jealous, and then a scene that says confrontation, right? That she says something really mean. So I don't end up know what I ended up writing yet. So, but
Right.
that's the point. It's like they're very, very specific, detailed scenes, and that kind of helps me. Basically, the book is already written when it's like this. It
Yeah.
just needs to be put in a manuscript, but it's written. It
Yeah.
has all of its opening, its middle, its climax, its resolution, its end scene, the ending line, the opening line. All of it is in here. Um, it's a very, very meticulous outline. But for me, it takes about a month, and then I feel ready to just draft and kind of let the words flow on the page.
Hmm. So when you're outlining, and amazed that it takes you only a month. Um, when you're outlining like that, are you outlining chronologically? Do you begin at the beginning and just outline straight through, or do you know where what certain scenes are going to be and roughly where they're going to fall in relation to other scenes in the book?
I do generally do it in chronologically, but if something pops up that I'm like, oh, this would be a good idea for that later, I will do that. Actually, we've hit turbulence. The first scene I ever wrote in the entire book was the final chapter.
Oh,
And
wow.
it is the only chapter in the entire book that I do not think a single word has changed. Marissa can correct me if I'm wrong. That is the only chapter that it has not changed throughout however many drafts we've done
Wow.
because that was the scene I saw so clearly. Like I didn't want to write the ending first. I wasn't intending to do that because I do write chronologically. But I just like woke up one morning and that scene was like burning in the back of my brain and I can see it so clearly and I'm like, I just need to write it now. I was like, I'll write it now and clean it later.
Hmm.
It never needed to be cleaned. It came out of me so clearly in one shot in like 1 hour and I was kind of scared. I was like, this is crazy. Like
Yeah.
I love this. And so I do try to write chronologically, like if a scene like that, and in my other books, it wasn't always the last scene, but there sometimes is like a very pivotal scene that stays stuck in my head. I'll just write that first, no matter where it
Hmm.
is, just to get it down on the page for sure.
But I mean, like, so you wrote the last scene of your book first, but was that the first part of your outline? Did your outline
Um,
commence with that scene and then you outlined it backwards?
I think my outline commenced with like, I think the first thing that We've Hit Turbulence started with was that I said they need to be on a plane arguing. That
Yeah.
was the first thing. So it wasn't the very beginning because she has to get to the plane,
Hmm.
but it wasn't the end. It was I saw like maybe like two like I don't know, like 30% into the book is where I started with my outline. So I wrote that like, okay, they have to argue on the plane. What do they argue about? Their breakup. Okay, now I need to back it up. How does she get next to him on the plane? Like so I kind of like
Hmm.
work a little bit out of order. But for me, that is why the index cards are so pivotal because I can lay them on the floor and be like,
Yep.
okay, if this is scene A and this is scene F, I can just put a whole bunch of space between the two of them and I could see on the floor that there's a big gap that I need to start
Yep.
filling with other cards.
Yep.
So for me, that's kind of why I prefer the index card method. I know people do it like online and like other things, but for me, being able to move it around, I think is very important because I can leave a big gap and be like, there's a huge jump from here to here. I gotta figure out how to fill it.
Yeah. And I feel like, when people talk about narrative logic, that's what they mean,
Hmm.
because there's something, the books are born from creativity and imagination, but nonetheless, they have a certain like logic and almost like a mathematical precision to them. Because
Yeah,
just like you say, if you know, certain points of the book, they imply other points of the book that you might not know yet, but
exactly.
you know something needs to be there,
That's
right? And
very
even if
much,
you don't know
yeah.
exactly what it is.
That's why I find that specific method so helpful, is
Yep.
because I can see that I need to get from here to here. And I'm like, okay, like physically see it with my own eyes. Okay, how
Hmm.
am I getting from here to here? So for me, like the index cards is usually pretty free flowing. I'll write down scenes as they come to me. Though, like I pick one night to do this, and I try to like do the laying them out in one night. Um, and I'm writing the scenes as they're coming to me. I'm copying off the general outline I gave Marissa, and as I'm writing, I'm like, oh, that's a good idea for scene, and that's a good idea. And I'll write them all, and I'll lay them out, and then I'll be like, all right, there's a gap here. How do I get there? Oh, I could add this scene. Oh, but that means I have to add this scene way earlier to make this scene
Hmm.
make sense. And it kind of becomes like this giant puzzle, which is kind of really, it's fun for me to
Yeah, it is
solve.
like a puzzle. It's like a
Yeah,
jigsaw puzzle.
it's literally like a jigsaw puzzle, and especially the colored method is really helpful to me because it helps you see like I said, I for We've Hit Turbulence when I laid it out, the first third of the book was almost all like all the cards that were colored for Olive's internal conflict and Olive's conflict with Tyler. But then her conflict with Delia doesn't come in until way later. And I was like, okay, I need to
Hmm.
start pulling some of those scenes into here and make it a little more like if you see one big block of one color, like
Yes,
you're gonna bore your reader.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Right, that's fascinating. So it's that using different colors adds like another layer
Yeah.
of structure because like you say, you can say like, oh, I've got like a ton of green cards here. That's too many. It's too many green
Exactly.
cards.
And it's good because, I write on the cards, but then like I stand and I'm looking at it and I don't need to read the individual scenes to see there's a huge chunk of green right here. I
Hmm.
gotta I gotta break this up with some purple and some pink and like it kind of helps me. And that's like pacing is the hardest thing for me as a writer. It was always the hardest thing. It was the hardest thing for me to get the hang of in the program. It's still the hardest thing. Every edit letter I get from an editor, like that's like something that it's like, oh, we can fix the pacing here. That has been my biggest method to getting ahead of pacing problems, is because I
Hmm.
can see it. I can see with my own eyes that the B plot doesn't come in till the second third of the book, and that doesn't
Right.
make any sense. And I have to move it earlier. And C plot, where the hell is C plot? Where did it even go? I dropped it halfway through. I got to get back to it. So it's been
Hmm.
very helpful in that sense.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great piece of advice.
Hmm.
Uh, if you can do that. I mean, I wrote a book once with an index card method that was similar to
Hmm.
yours for the outlining. And then I was like, oh, I got this figured out now. And I tried to do it for my next book, and it didn't work for the other
Yeah.
book. I had to find some other method
Hmm.
for the next book.
I always say that one day, I think for the next book I work on, I will make like a video on my process for Instagram
Hmm.
because I love talking about it. And every time I post like on my Instagram story, like I'm outlining tonight, people are always like, "Oh my God, what is that? What are you doing? Like, what is it? What does it look like?" So I do have to make a video about that for people
Yeah.
because
Oh, you totally should do
I
that.
find it very fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it would be helpful for people to see that in
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, I think definitely, and that's something I never did until I joined this program. I
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that method was mentioned in Story Genius, which we have to read in one of the classes.
Hmm.
But I took it like 0 to 100, and I made it like 8 bajillion cards. But that general method, I believe, like came from Story Genius.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's still in the program. We
Yeah, it's a
still,
great book. Very
we
helpful to
make,
me. I have that one dog-eared all over the place
mhm.
still.
Yeah, we make the people in the thesis courses read
Hmm.
Story Genius. Well, folks, we're coming to the end of our Wireside chat. So I just want to thank Jessica for joining us. This is just wonderful. And I have to say again, I'm just thrilled. I'm so proud of you for everything
Thank
that you've
you.
accomplished. I enjoyed the heck out of your book.
Thank you.
And I know you're just at the outset of what's going to be an amazing career.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was really great to see everybody. I see a lot of people, you still have questions. If you put on Instagram, I'm always doing Q&As with the book publicist on my Instagram story, so I'm happy to answer questions and talk with people further.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you
All
so
right, good
much.
night, everyone.
Good night.